This is a follow-up to my Aemeath video, where I explained why I initially felt pulling her wasn't worth it for my account. The main issue wasn't her kit, it was my account setup. I don't own Lupa, Chisa, Linné, or Mornier, and the only realistic teammates I had were Shorekeeper and Jianshin. Because of that, my first tests were done with a very weak team environment, and at the time, most of her upgrades were only at level 6. Since then, I fully built her. Every node is level 10, including her Resonance Liberation, and I specifically wanted to retest her damage without using any of her premium teammates to see what her real output looks like when she's actually invested. Also, just to be clear about the context of this test, I did pull her S1 from a single pull, so that part wasn't planned. And let me make this clear to some of you, not the ones that support my statements. For free-to-play and low-spend players, you don't get to react to every patch. You plan several banners ahead, you pick which roles you actually need, and you accept that skipping characters is part of progression. In this case, we had Linné and Mornier first, and there was no confirmation that Aemeath would be right after them. When Aemeath suddenly showed up the very next patch, a lot of players were already drained or had committed their pulls to those banners. That's why comments like, "you're missing her premium supports," don't really address the problem being tested here. The entire purpose of this run is to show how Aemeath performs when you don't have the ideal lineup, because that is the normal situation for most planned accounts. If you need Lupa, Chisa, Linné, and Mornier just to make her feel functional, then that's not a character evaluation anymore. That's a full team investment requirement. So this test is intentionally built around accessible teammates. It's meant to answer a practical question. If you already own Aemeath and you don't have her best-in-slot supports, does she still produce competitive damage when she's properly built? That's the real context behind these numbers. So, base stats sit at roughly 67.9% crit rate and 251.6% crit damage. With her dedicated Echo set active, crit rate jumps to about 88%. Once Shorekeeper's buffs are added on top, that's an extra 12.5% crit rate and 25% crit damage. In a proper rotation, that puts her at roughly 100.5% crit rate and around 276% crit damage. On top of that, her S1 modifies the hold skill. During the hold animation, the final hit gains an extra 300% crit damage and pulls enemies in. That bonus only applies to the last part of the hold skill. It does not increase her overall damage profile outside that final hit, and its other real benefit is letting her build Forte faster. So functionally, S1 is quality of life and a burst spike on that second-to-last hit, not a major upgrade to her sustained or total rotation damage. For testing, I ran her with Jianshin, Shorekeeper, and Sanhua against Thundering Memphis, since it's one of the hardest targets in Tower of Adversity, and gives a more realistic damage check. With Shorekeeper and Jianshin as supports, the best result I recorded was 384,785 damage. With Shorekeeper and Sanhua instead, the number dropped to 322,296 damage. So, in direct comparison, Jianshin is clearly the stronger partner for this setup. But the downside is rotation speed. Without at least S2 on Jianshin, the rotation becomes noticeably slower. It still works, but it's not smooth, and you feel the downtime. Compared to my previous video, this is a completely different result. Before, I was barely breaking around 100k. That gap alone shows how much of my earlier conclusion was affected by low node levels and not having her Forte properly built before testing. Although, after full investment, her damage is genuinely solid. So, the real takeaway is simple. If you actually build her properly, yes, she is worth playing. The condition is that you commit to maxing her nodes and running a functional rotation. S1 is fine to have, but it does not meaningfully raise her final damage output. It mostly improves comfort and gives a stronger pull-in hit during the hold skill. Going forward, I'll probably try to push her to S2 or S3, depending on how many pulls I can get before her banner ends. That would let me avoid having to invest into 2 more new characters and their weapons just to make her feel complete. That's the plan, and I'm going to need some luck for it.